Yeah, Fenders take that well. Everybody's talking, people. Harry Nilsson made it a big hit. Won a Grammy for Best Male Vocal that year. Also Midnight Cowboy, the theme, won a Grammy for the Best Instrumental that year. But Harry Nilsson didn't write Everybody's Talking. A guy named Fred Neil wrote it. Fred Neil, to me, was the greatest Florida songwriter. He grew up in St. Petersburg. He moved to New York and he wrote songs at the Brill Building. Had like a B-side to a Roy Orbison song. And got tired of that, and then he went down to the village and he taught everyone how to play folk music. Bob Dylan's first playing was playing harmonica with Fred Neil. And Fred Neil finally got sick of that scene and he moved down to Coconut Grove and he kind of just was a hermit for 50 years after that. He wrote another really great song called The Dolphins, which we're going to perform for you a little later. What does Midnight Cowboy mean to me? My wife and I moved to downtown Hollywood in 1989, and I told someone that I moved down here, and they said, "Oh, you're looking for the ghost of Ratso Rizzo." And I'm like, what does that mean? Because, you know, 1989, I was only 20-something years old, 25, and if I had seen Midnight Cowboy, it would have been a very edited version because it would be on TV. They cut out 30 minutes of this film for many purposes. One of the claims to fame of Midnight Cowboy is it's the only movie that won an Oscar for Best Picture that was rated X. And it was rated X at the time because they had just started the production code. They still were figuring out like who could see this movie or not. And actually, the people that made the movie kind of wanted the X rating. Wasn't going to hurt them. They were going to figure out how to show it in art house places and get this movie shown. Ended up when they did the original showing of the film in New York City, it sold out for weeks. Like 62,000 tickets sold in like X amount of time. It was unbelievable. It was going to get national attention then after this. The producer was John Schlesinger. He is a British filmmaker, and he was also a documentary filmmaker for the BBC. And this was, the word cowboy is in the name of this movie, but this was the movie that killed the cowboy. This was the year that we were going to not have John Wayne anymore, and those hero movies. This was a movie that was about reality. This was, you know, ultra reality, borrowing from the French New Wave. The videographer, he was a young man that Roman Polanski had offered to film this movie, and he didn't want to use the big cameras of Hollywood. He wanted to use small handheld cameras with long lenses. And as you watch this movie, it's amazing some of the shots they have. There's a shot of John Voight's character, Joe Buck, and he's walking through Times Square, and there's hundreds of people there, but the only person you see is Joe Buck. You know, that cowboy hat and that big head sticking out of it. One of the other things they wanted to do was use natural light on everything, not big lights on everything. And so they shot New York. Movies about New York previous to this movie were filmed in a studio. They didn't go out on the street and film New York. I mean, there were some scenes, but this film is almost 100% shot on location, either Texas, New York. There's one scene in New Jersey that's supposed to be Texas, but you'll never know, now I've told you that. And then Florida in itself. And all the New York scenes, they had passed a rule where you didn't have to get permission for people in the background that was in your film anymore. This was good timing for this film, for them making this film. And so there's a scene where they're at a fruit stand, and Ratso's ripping off some fruit or whatever, you know. And this is the real dude who worked at the fruit stand, ended up even having like a speaking part in it, you know, which was amazing. So the Texas scenes are kind of bright, but the Florida scenes oversaturated the film. I don't know if you guys know Andy Sweet, the photographer from Miami Beach, that had these very oversaturated pictures. He's sort of become famous recently. It has that feel to it. There's also very interesting things with the book. The book was written by James Hurley and John Schlesinger, were both gay gentlemen. And this book has, part of that X rating was because there were gay situations that were happening in this movie. It's never meant to be. This movie is about buddies. This movie is about two loners that were down on their luck, that somehow fell in love, that has nothing to do with sex, you know? And it's done beautifully. And these are two guys, I guess you want to pull for Joe Buck a little bit because he's just a naive guy, but you know, Rasso's like, he's a con man, you know? And there's somehow that you fall in love with him by the end of the movie also. For the screenwriting, they thought about Gore Vidal, they thought about Truman Capote to write it, and they ended up getting Waldo Salt, which Waldo Salt was a film writer that was blacklisted, and he had not been involved with a lot of things at this time, and it ended up his daughter Jennifer Salt plays a character in the movie also. So you have to look for the oversaturation. You also, the book, half of it is in Texas and not in New York. The movie is only the first 10th, but there are flashbacks, there are flash presents, and there are flash forwards in this film to explain the story of Joe Buck in Texas. And often they're in the glass on the bus or a mirror that he's looking into. There is this association with what was at a different time, but at the same time. And it's really amazing to look for in the film when you see it. It won Best Picture, it won Best Director, and actually that year, Dustin Hoffman and Jon Voight were up for the Best Actor in the same film, which was very rare. And what's very odd about this is there's two references of John Wayne in this film, one very subtle and one way over the top. This is before political correctness. You know, you're going to hear words you wouldn't hear in a movie anymore, you know. You're going to see, you know, it's not superheroes, it's, you know, it's anti-heroes. But the two references of John Wayne are amazing, and oddly enough, he won the Best Actor for True Grit that year. So, you know, John Wayne got his due late in the same year that Midnight Cowboy killed the cowboy. The scenes from Florida are basically, there's a dream sequence. I'm sure many of you have seen this movie already, and some of you haven't, you know. And there's a saying that, you know, this movie is for those who have never seen it and those who will never forget it. The music was done by, well, let me give you the Florida scenes first. There's a dream sequence where Ratso thinks that the goal of this movie, this is the greatest movie about coming to Florida, and that's paradise. This is Ratso's dream. There's a Florida poster in his room. There is an orange juice commercial in the movie. There are only two studios that are set up that are not out in public. One of it's the apartment building that they're in, and they ripped out the whole entire apartment building of this rundown place and built it back up to look exactly like the inside of this building. It was easier than falling through the floor of some building there. And then there was also a scene that was Andy Warhol and the factory people in there. And there's this hippie scene that they shot for 4 or 5 days trying to get like the feeling, I'm sure they were partying and all this stuff. And there's only maybe 6 minutes of it in the movie, you know? But it's probably the only thing that is dated in it, you know, because it's very 60s at the time. And one of my favorite lines that Ratso says that is like the Florida-related thing is that there's two basic items necessary to sustain life. They are sunshine and coconuts. Did you know that? That's a fact. And they got a terrific amount of coconuts down there in Florida. So there's a dream sequence when he gets here that he thinks he's going to be a pool boy at the Diplomat. And it's amazing. And he runs behind the Diplomat, and there's a great scene of him and John Voight racing down the beach. It's hilarious. And then there's the pool scene out back. And when they got there, they scouted, and they thought they were going to get a bunch of bikini girls or bathing suit girls, and it was all retirees, and some of them had like a nose shade on. And John Schlesinger thought this was the greatest thing ever. So the whole scene turned into, he gave them all nose shields. I don't think they all have them on, but it's like amazing, you know? And then the very end of the movie comes to Hollywood. They're already at the Diplomat, but they come to Hollywood, and it's a time where they need to get some new clothes, and something's gonna change. There's a change in life. In fact, Joe Buck ends up dressing like this instead of a cowboy after he gets to Hollywood, Florida, you know? And it's only, the scene was shot only a block away, and then all the way to the circle, and there's this amazing shot right at the end of The Great Southern from 1968. And I could never find a still of that, so it's pretty amazing. They also eat in a diner that everyone thinks was the Rainbow Diner because of the Rainbow Cafe, because of how they're walking down the block. But the reality is they edited it, and it was a Dunkin' Donuts that was on Young Circle. You know, there used to be a Subway on this side. Well, it was in the like twin spot, but on the northwest corner. And it sat out there. It was probably there until the early 90s, actually. I think even a detached building like the Subway was. But one of the coolest things with this movie is the soundtrack and the music and how these songs came back. When they were cutting the film, they started listening to Everybody's Talking, and they had realized they're not going to be able to afford to put this song in the movie. It was already won a Grammy, I believe, and so they asked Harry Nilsson to write another song, and he wrote a song. I guess The Lord Lives in New York City, and it's a beautiful song, but it didn't fit for the movie. You know, Joni Mitchell wrote a song called Midnight Cowboy that never totally got recorded. There's a demo of it, and it's amazing, but wasn't it? They did some editing to Dylan's Lay Lady Lay. Randy Newman has a song called Cowboy that they worked with it, and then they hired John Barry to do the soundtrack. And John Barry is the composer that wrote the James Bond theme and many other big themes that was important. So the Midnight Cowboy theme is an instrumental that is just somber and emotional and no words, and it's beautiful. And on that version, they had Toots Thielsman play the harmonica, who is a famous harmonica player that you probably know mostly from the guy who played in Sesame Street, you know? And when you hear a sound in the movie, you'll be like, oh, I noticed that tone. But when they realized, John Barry was like, well, we can just re-record Everybody's Talking with Harry Nilsson, and we won't have to pay the publishing rights because we'll have the publishing rights for this. So they recorded it a bunch of different times, and it's laid in the movie many different ways. So there's one where it's Everybody's Talking, but it's Toots playing the harmonica, and it works really well. And then they also, like for some of the hippie scenes, they needed like a psychedelic band. So they had hired Elephant's Memory, which was a New York psychedelic band at the time, but they were probably most famous because they were John Lennon's backup band for Somewhere in New York, which was I guess Nixon era record, because on the cover they had like Nixon dancing with Chairman Mao naked on it. So it just pieces together well there. This is a dream come true for me. You know, I've been looking for the ghost of Ratso Rizzo ever since I've moved down here, and we've talked about this. I did a lecture in 2022 called Hollywood Goes Hollywood, 2023 January. But even before that, we were talking about doing a movie series. And for this to finally come to fruition is amazing. So we're gonna give you a little more music, and then we'll watch the movie. We're gonna do one Fred Neil song, and then we'll do the theme from Midnight Cowboy. We'll have to clean a little bit that's out of here, so it's not in the movie also, but it'll be quick. And then we're gonna take that ride.